I knew something was wrong the second I pulled into my driveway. The porch light I'd left off was glowing, my front gate was cracked open, and there was a faint scuff mark on the door frame like someone had tried to force their way in. My stomach tightened. Around here, we didn't worry much about burglars. We worried about something far worse. The HOA president, a woman everyone else called Karen, though never to her face. Karen had made it her personal mission to nitpick every inch of my property, from the color of my shutters to how my German Shepherd Max barked at squirrels. But tonight she crossed a line she could never uncross. Because what Karen didn't know, what she couldn't possibly imagine, was that while I was gone, Max was home, and Max was waiting. Before I dive in, drop a comment below with your location and local time. I'd love to know where you're watching from. When I first moved into Pine Ridge Estates, I honestly thought I had found my slice of paradise. The real estate brochure bragged about quiet streets, manicured lawns, and community harmony. To me, it sounded like exactly what I needed. After 20 years of working construction contracts across the state, I was tired of motels, traffic, and noise. I wanted a place to finally settle down. The house I bought was nothing fancy, just a comfortable single-story brick place with a wide front porch, a backyard big enough for grilling, and most importantly, plenty of room for Max, my German Shepherd. Max wasn't just a pet, he was family. I'd raised him from a pup after he flunked out of police K-9 training, not because he wasn't smart enough, but because he was too independent for their rigid program. I liked that about him. Loyal, clever, and stubborn, just like me. The first few days were bliss. I painted the porch railing, unpacked boxes at my own pace, and even waved to a few friendly neighbors who walked by with their dogs. Max would sit beside me in the evenings, his ears pricking at every sound, his eyes bright. I remember thinking, this is it. Finally, peace. But peace, as I soon learned, doesn't last long when there's an HOA involved. It started small, like all HOA nonsense does. On the third morning, as I was hauling a box of tools into the garage, a woman in a bright red blazer marched up my driveway as if she owned the concrete under her heels. Her hair was perfectly sprayed into place, her lips matched her jacket, and her smile was the kind you see on a crocodile before it snaps shut. "Hello there, I'm Deborah Morgan, president of the Pine Ridge Homeowners Association," she announced, sticking out her hand. I shook it reluctantly, but I swear she had the grip of someone trying to establish dominance, not neighborly warmth. "You must be Mr. Lawson, the new homeowner," she added, peering past me into my garage like she was inspecting it for contraband. "That's right," I said, still settling in. "Well, I just wanted to welcome you to our wonderful community. We take great pride in maintaining our standards here," she said, her eyes darting toward Max, who was watching her from the porch with his usual alert stare. "That's Max," I explained. "Don't worry, he's friendly unless given a reason otherwise." Her smile faltered. "Yes, about that. We do have certain rules regarding pets. Large breeds can be intimidating to some of our residents. I'll have to drop off the guidelines." I laughed, thinking she was joking. She wasn't. Over the next week, I found 3 separate friendly notices stuffed into my mailbox, one about my trash can being visible from the street, one about the temporary American flag I'd hung before getting a proper mount, and one, of course, about Max barking at 7:15 a.m. when the mail truck rattled by. Now look, Max wasn't one of those non-stop barkers. He barked when something moved past the fence, or when someone came too close. That's called doing his job. But apparently HOA Karen thought otherwise. At the first HOA meeting I attended, things went from ridiculous to personal. I sat in the back just wanting to observe, but Karen spotted me instantly. "Ah, our newest resident, Mr. Lawson," she said, her voice loud enough to draw every pair of eyes toward me. "We're so glad you could join us. Though I will remind you that our bylaws clearly state noise disturbances must be minimized, and several residents have mentioned your dog." Half the room looked at me with sympathy. The other half looked like they'd been waiting for someone else to get in trouble, so it wasn't them. I raised an eyebrow. "You mean the single bark at the mailman?" I asked. "I'm sure Max will apologize in writing." A couple of people snickered, but Karen's eyes narrowed. She didn't appreciate sarcasm, especially not in public. "That sort of attitude is exactly what disrupts community harmony," she snapped. I leaned back in my chair, arms crossed, and gave her a smile that said, "Lady, you picked the wrong neighbor." After that night, it became clear she had a personal vendetta. She began patrolling the street, walking slower past my house than anyone else's, taking photos with her phone and scribbling notes on a clipboard like she was building a criminal case. Max would stand at the fence watching her every move, tail stiff. She hated that. One afternoon, I caught her peering through the slats of my backyard gate while pretending to check the landscaping. I stepped outside, coffee in hand. "See something you like?" I asked. She flinched, but quickly recovered. just ensuring all residents maintain consistent standards. You wouldn't want violations, would you? Lady, the only violation happening is you trespassing, I said flatly. Her lips pursed so tightly I thought she might implode. She stormed off heels, stabbing the pavement like tiny daggers. That was the moment I realized this wasn't about HOA rules anymore. This was about control, and she wasn't going to stop. But I had no idea just how far she'd go, or how badly it would backfire. If there's one thing I've learned about people like Karen, it's that they don't back off when you push back. They double down, and boy did she. Within a week of that landscaping inspection, I received my first fine $50 for visible trash receptacles. The funny part, my trash bin was tucked neatly behind the fence, same as everyone else's. The only way she could have seen it was if she had walked up my driveway, leaned over the fence, and craned her neck like a giraffe. I refused to pay. That's when the flood started. Every other day, a new letter appeared in my mailbox. One claimed my mailbox was half an inch too tall. Another said the porch light bulb wasn't the correct warm white shade per community guidelines. My favorite was the $100 citation for unauthorized exterior decor, which turned out to be the small wind chime my late wife had loved. That one really burned. I started keeping the letters in a folder, partly for evidence, partly because it amused me how far she'd stretch reality to justify her crusade. If she spent half as much time on community improvements as she did on micromanaging my property, Pine Ridge would have been the crown jewel of the county. But no, all her energy was laser-focused on me, and especially on Max. Large animals are a liability, one letter read. You must demonstrate adequate control of your dog, or further action will be taken. Adequate control, Max was better trained than most humans I knew. Sit, stay, heel guard, he could do it all. But Karen's problem wasn't training. It was intimidation. She hated how his presence undermined her little kingdom of fear. People were less afraid of her clipboard when 100 pounds of muscle and teeth was sitting calmly beside me. At the next HOA meeting, she pounced. We've had multiple complaints about Mr. Lawson's German Shepherd, she announced, standing at the podium like she was addressing the Supreme Court. It barks aggressively at neighbors and creates an unsafe environment. Unsafe? I stood my voice steady. Max hasn't bitten anyone. He hasn't even chased anyone. He sits behind my fence, same as every other dog. If he barked, it's because someone was snooping too close. A few neighbors murmured agreement. One even whispered, "It's true," but when Karen shot them a glare sharp enough to slice glass, they quickly looked down at their notes. Karen folded her arms. "We have rules for a reason. If you can't abide by them, perhaps this community isn't a good fit for you." That line, that smug little line, "Perhaps this community isn't a good fit." She had used it before to bully families into selling when they couldn't afford escalating fines. I could practically see the gleam in her eye as she imagined forcing me out too, but I wasn't going anywhere. After the meeting, I overheard her telling another board member, "If he thinks he can ignore me, he's mistaken. I'll find a violation worth evicting him over." That's when I knew it wasn't paranoia she was plotting. The weeks that followed were a circus. Karen started showing up at odd hours, walking past my house at dawn, circling back in the evening, always with her phone raised as if recording. Once I caught her snapping photos through my front window while pretending to check the condition of the streetlight. I stepped outside and held up my own phone. "Smile," I called out. "You're trespassing." Her jaw clenched so hard I thought her teeth might crack. She stormed off without a word. Neighbors started whispering. Some pitied me, others admired the way I stood my ground. A few even confided they had been victims of her antics too, but never dared confront her. Apparently she once fined a veteran for flying a flag on Memorial Day because it wasn't pre-approved. Another family got dinged because their kids' bikes were left leaning against the garage for 5 minutes. It wasn't just me. Karen was a menace. But I had one thing no one else had, Max. She couldn't intimidate him. She couldn't fine him. And she definitely couldn't control him. That drove her crazy. Her letters grew more desperate, accusing me of operating a security business because Max was trained like a police dog. I laughed out loud when I read that one. Apparently, obedience classes now qualified as commercial enterprise. The final straw came one rainy afternoon. I was on a business call when Max growled at the window. I looked up to see Karen, umbrella in hand, walking straight up my driveway. She bent down, measuring tape in hand, as if checking the exact distance of my shrubs from the curb. I opened the door. "Lose something?" I asked. She straightened, feigning innocence. "Routine inspection." In my driveway, her lips curled. "You'll regret being difficult, Mr. Lawson. The board will hear about this." I stepped closer, lowering my voice. "If you ever step foot inside my property again without permission, I'll treat it the same as a break-in." Consider this your only warning." For the first time, I saw a flicker of hesitation in her eyes. But it didn't last. She spun on her heel and marched off, water splashing around her shoes. I knew she'd be back. And I knew next time she wouldn't just be prowling outside. The thing about battles with people like Karen is that they always escalate. They don't know how to let go, how to move on. Every pushback is taken as an insult, every resistance as a challenge. By now, I had figured out I wasn't dealing with an HOA president anymore. I was dealing with a general who thought she was waging a holy war. Her crusade against me wasn't slowing down. It was accelerating. First came the photos. Neighbors whispered that Karen had been caught standing in the alley with a telephoto lens, snapping shots of my backyard, like she was documenting a crime scene. One guy down the street told me he saw her crouching behind his hedge just to get a better angle. When he asked what she was doing, she hissed official inspection and stormed away. Then came the rattling of my gate. Max always alerted me with a deep rumble in his chest when it happened. Someone always at night would jiggle the latch as if testing it. The first time I thought maybe it was kids. The second time I suspected Karen. By the third I was certain. Nobody else in Pine Ridge had that much gall. I decided to confront her. One afternoon I caught her red-handed. She was standing at the edge of my yard, clipboard in one hand, her phone in the other. Max was behind me on the porch, fur-bristling eyes locked on her every twitch. Enjoying the view, I called out. She startled then, quickly smoothed her blazer and lifted her chin. Routine perimeter inspection. Community safety requires vigilance. I stepped closer. This isn't your perimeter, it's mine. And I've warned you before trespass again, and you'll regret it. Her nostrils flared. You think your little mutt scares me? That did it. My patience snapped. First off, he's not a mutt, he's a K9 trained better than half the cops in this county. Second, you step foot inside that house, you're not dealing with HOA rules anymore. You're dealing with the law. Her smile was thin, venomous. We'll see about that. And she turned on her heel, scribbling furiously on her clipboard. That night, I sat on the porch sipping a beer, Max lying at my feet, and I said out loud, "She's gonna break in, isn't she?" Max's ears twitched, and I swear he almost nodded. The signs were all there. Karen wasn't satisfied with fines, wasn't satisfied with photos, wasn't satisfied with intimidation. No, she needed evidence. She needed some smoking gun that would let her say, "See, he doesn't belong here." The problem was there was nothing to find. My house was clean, my paperwork solid, my dues paid. That didn't matter to her. In her mind, she'd already built the case. I was the villain disturbing her perfect little kingdom. She just needed a final piece to justify crushing me. So when I had to leave town for a 3-day work job, I hesitated. Normally, I'd board Max at a trusted kennel or bring him with me. But this time, something told me to leave him home. Not just because I trusted him, but because I didn't trust her. I rigged up extra locks, double-checked the windows, and told my nearest neighbor, Jim, to keep an eye out. "She's bold," I warned him. "Don't be surprised if you see her snooping while I'm gone." Jim chuckled. "That woman thinks she's queen of the cul-de-sac. But don't worry, I'll watch." And Lawson, he lowered his voice. "Good thing you've got Max." On the morning I left, Max sat tall at the door as I packed my truck. His expression was serious, almost military. I knelt down, ruffled his fur, and whispered, "Protect the house, boy. Don't let her win." His tail thumped once against the floor. As I drove off, I glanced in the mirror. Karen's car was parked 2 houses down. She sat inside, sunglasses on, pretending to scroll her phone. She thought she was subtle. She wasn't. The next 48 hours were tense, even from miles away. Jim texted me the first night. "She was snooping around again. Walked up to your porch, pretended to check the railing. Max barked. She bolted. The second night, lights on near your place. Didn't look like you. Max raising hell." I clenched my fists. It was happening. She was circling, testing, waiting. On the 3rd day, the message I dreaded came. Pretty sure she went inside. Saw her slip through the gate. Max went silent after that. Don't know what's going on. My stomach dropped. Karen had crossed the line. She wasn't snooping anymore, she was trespassing. I gunned my truck back toward Pine Ridge, every mile crawling slower than the last. My mind raced through scenarios, Karen rifling through my cabinets, planting fake evidence, maybe even trying to provoke Max. But what she didn't understand, what she could never understand, was that Max wasn't just a pet. He wasn't just a dog. He was a guardian, trained for moments exactly like this. And by the time I got home, I had a feeling she'd already learned that the hard way. By the time I turned onto Pine Ridge Drive, my knuckles were white around the steering wheel. The sun had dipped low, casting that strange twilight glow where everything looks half real. My headlights swept across familiar lawns, hedges trimmed to regulation perfection, and then finally onto my own property. The gate stood wide open. My heart dropped. Max would never allow that. He didn't just let gates swing open. That meant someone had been there. That meant she had been there. I parked fast engine still running and sprinted up the path. The porch light flickered the one I always kept off. My key turned in the lock, but the door was already ajar. I pushed it open slowly, hand-braced ears straining. That's when I heard it, the unmistakable sound of shuffling papers. Someone was inside. And then I heard another sound, low and rumbling, like distant thunder building inside a chest. Max. I stepped inside. The living room was dim, lit only by the glow of a flashlight beam darting across my shelves. And there she was. HOA, Karen herself, blazer slightly askew, hair frizzed from humidity, her precious clipboard tucked under one arm while she rifled through my drawers with the other. For a second I was almost impressed. The audacity it took to waltz into someone else's home like she owned it was staggering, but whatever smug satisfaction she'd carried in had evaporated, because there between her and the door stood Max. His body was rigid, muscles coiled, tail straight. His ears were forward, eyes locked on her every movement. His teeth weren't bared, not yet, but the growl rumbling through him was so deep it vibrated the air. Karen froze, her flashlight wobbling. "Good dog," she stammered, her voice higher than usual. "Nice doggy. I'm just here on official business." Official business, I almost laughed out loud. She sounded like a cop caught sneaking into a donut shop after hours. She tried again, this time louder, as if reasoning with him. "You don't want to hurt me. I'm the president of this community. I have authority here." Max took one step forward, slow and deliberate. She flinched, backing into the edge of my coffee table with a clatter. Her voice trembled. "Stay back. I'll call the police." Max didn't move. He just held her there, a silent sentinel, eyes burning, with a focus that said, "One wrong move, and you'll regret it." From the doorway, I finally spoke. "Go ahead," I said, my voice cold. "Call them. Let's see who they arrest me for living in my own house, or you for breaking into it." Karen spun, eyes wide, face pale. For once she had no rehearsed line, no smug retort. She was caught. Her mouth opened, then closed. She glanced at Max, then back at me. This isn't what it looks like," she stammered. "Oh, it looks exactly like what it is," I shot back. "Trespassing, breaking and entering. Abuse of power." Her hand trembled around her phone. I could see the calculation racing behind her eyes. If she called the police, she'd have to admit she was inside without permission. If she didn't, she'd have to face me and Max alone. "Sit," I commanded, and Max dropped instantly to a sitting position, though his eyes never left her. It was a show of control, a reminder that unlike her, I followed rules. Karen tried to compose herself, puffing her chest out like she still held authority. "I was investigating violations," she declared weakly. "Neighbors reported suspicious activity. As president, I have the right—" "No, you don't," I snapped. "You don't have the right to set foot in here without a warrant. You don't have the right to rifle through my things. And you sure as hell don't have the right to think you're above the law." Max's growl rose again, low and steady. He was reading her fear like a book. Karen's facade cracked. "Call him off," she squeaked. "He's dangerous." "No," I said, stepping closer. "He's disciplined. He hasn't touched you, has he? He's just keeping you where you belong, cornered like the predator you are." Outside, I noticed shadows moving. Neighbors had gathered, drawn by the commotion. A couple of them pressed closer to my windows, their phones raised. Word was spreading. Karen was caught red-handed, trapped by the very dog she'd tried to have banished. She turned toward the window, horror dawning. They're recording," she whispered. "Smile," I said, my voice laced with irony. "This is the inspection you'll be remembered for." Max shifted his head, tilting eyes glinting in the dim light. And for the first time, Karen seemed to realize she wasn't in charge anymore. She wasn't the queen with her clipboard and her fines. She was just a trespasser, humiliated and powerless, held hostage by the loyalty of a dog she had underestimated. Karen stood frozen in the middle of my living room, her blazer-wrinkled clipboard hanging awkwardly at her side like a useless shield. Max sat at attention between her and the front door shoulders, squared eyes burning holes straight through her. His ears twitched every time she shifted her weight, and that deep, vibrating growl rolled out of his chest like thunder. I stayed in the doorway, arms crossed. I wanted her to feel the weight of the moment, the weight of being powerless for once. "You know what happens next, right?" I said calmly. "You wait here until the cops arrive. Or you try to move, and Max makes sure you regret it." Karen's face twisted, equal parts outrage and fear. "This is harassment," she snapped, though her voice cracked. "You can't hold me hostage in your home." I raised an eyebrow. Funny, I wasn't the one who broke in. You did that all on your own. Her mouth opened shut, opened again. She looked down at Max as if trying to appeal to him. Good boy. You're a good boy, aren't you? You don't really want to scare me. Max tilted his head slightly but didn't budge. His eyes glinted like amber fire. Here's the difference between you and him, I said, stepping closer. You abuse power because you crave it. He uses power because he's trained to protect. He knows right from wrong better than you do. Karen's eyes darted to the window. Outside, a small crowd of neighbors had gathered, phones glowing. Some whispered to each other, others recorded openly. Word had clearly spread, HOA, Karen caught in the act. You're humiliating yourself, I said, and the best part, you did it to yourself. Her mask cracked. Turn that thing off, she shrieked, pointing toward the window. Stop recording. Max's growl deepened at the sudden movement. Karen froze again, hand half raised. Sweat beaded on her forehead. Careful, I warned. He doesn't like sudden gestures. Think of him like the law-steady patient, but don't push him. She dropped her hand, trembling. This is insane, she muttered. All I wanted was to make sure you were following community standards. I barked out a laugh. Community standards. You broke into my house. That's not enforcement, that's a felony. Her eyes flicked to her phone in her hand. She hesitated, thumb hovering over the screen. Go ahead, I said, leaning on the doorframe. Call 911. Tell them you're the HOA president who just broke into a resident's house to inspect his furniture. Tell them the only thing keeping you from leaving is a loyal German shepherd. Let's see how that works out for you. Her jaw clenched so tight I thought her teeth might crack. She lowered the phone slowly, realizing I was right. She couldn't call, not without burying herself. The minutes dragged on. The only sounds were Max's steady breathing and the muffled buzz of neighbors outside. I watched Karen unravel in real time, the way her shoulders sagged, the way her lipstick smile had long since disappeared. Finally, she tried a new tactic: negotiation. Mr. Lawson, she began, forcing a sickly sweet tone, why don't we just forget about all this? No fines, no inspections. I'll stay out of your way if you stay out of mine. I chuckled. You're offering a deal. After you broke into my house, you don't get to negotiate when you're already guilty. Her eyes narrowed, venom returning. You think you've won, but this isn't over. I have connections. I can make your life miserable. You already tried, I said, and look where it got you. Max suddenly stood, taking a single step closer. Karen squeaked and stumbled back into the coffee table. The clipboard slipped from her hand and clattered to the floor. She was shaking now, cornered not by teeth or claws, but by her own arrogance finally collapsing. Stay, I told Max, and he froze in place, still blocking the door. His discipline was perfect. That discipline, that control, that was what made him dangerous to her. She couldn't manipulate him, couldn't intimidate him. He wasn't swayed by titles or threats. To him, she was just an intruder, nothing more. Outside, a neighbor shouted, "Should we call the police for you, Lawson?" Karen's eyes went wide. "No, don't call them," she blurted, panic rising. She realized too late what she'd admitted in front of witnesses. She knew she was in the wrong. I smirked. "Thanks, Jim," I called back. "They're already on the way." I hadn't actually dialed yet, but Karen didn't know that. Watching her squirm was worth the bluff. She sagged against the table, defeated. The mighty HOA queen reduced to a trembling trespasser trapped in the very home she tried to control. And Max, he just sat there, calm as ever, eyes never leaving her, proving without a single word that he was the best guard I could ever ask for. I didn't have to actually call the cops. By then, half the neighborhood had their phones out, and in today's world, public humiliation travels faster than any siren. Still, I made the call anyway, cool, calm, and deliberate, because I wanted this on record. Yeah, this is Lawson on Pine Ridge Drive. I've got an intruder in my house. Yep, caught her red-handed. And yes, she's still here. I glanced at Karen, whose face had turned the color of curdled milk. No, she's not armed, but she's dangerous in a different way. When I hung up, I leaned against the doorframe, letting the silence choke her. Outside, the crowd grew larger. People whispered, chuckled, recorded. Some of the braver neighbors started narrating like sportscasters. There she is, Queen Karen herself, one man said, his voice carrying through the open window. Finally caught. Karen's face flushed crimson. "Stop it," she shouted, her voice breaking. "This is illegal. You can't film me." "Funny," I said. "That's exactly what you've been doing to everyone else." The irony hit her like a slap. She looked at the window again, then at Max, who shifted just enough to remind her that escape wasn't an option. Within minutes, the first squad car pulled up, red and blue lights, splashing across manicured hedges and tidy driveways. The crowd parted, phones raised higher. This was better than reality TV for them. It was reality HOA drama. Two officers stepped out, hands on their belts. One of them, Officer Daniels, I recognized from around town. Solid guy, reasonable. He walked up the porch and looked through the open door. His eyes landed on Karen, then on Max, then on me. "What's going on here, Lawson?" he asked, measured but curious. I gestured toward her. Caught the HOA president in my living room uninvited. Max kept her from leaving until I got back. Daniel's eyebrow arched. "That, true ma'am." Karen immediately launched into her performance. "Officer, thank goodness you're here. This man's dog is dangerous. It trapped me, wouldn't let me leave. I was just conducting an inspection and he set it on me." Daniels glanced at Max, who sat calmly tail-thumping once against the floor, like he knew exactly what was happening. Then he looked back at her. "Inspection. In his living room," she faltered. "Yes. As HOA president, I have authority." "No, you don't," Daniels cut her off flatly. "You have no right to enter a private residence without consent. That's trespassing." The crowd outside erupted in low murmurs, some laughing, some cheering quietly. Phones zoomed closer on Karen's mortified face. Her lips quivered. I was only trying to uphold standards. He's been violating rules, and I raised the folder I'd been keeping, every letter, every fine, every ridiculous notice. "You mean these standards, the ones you've been inventing to harass me, because I've got a whole file ready for anyone who wants to see how far you've abused your position." Daniels reached out, took the folder, and flipped through the stack. His brow furrowed deeper with each page. "This is excessive," he muttered. Then louder, "Ma'am, I'm going to need you to step outside with us." Karen's jaw dropped. "You can't treat me like a criminal." "You broke into his house," Daniels replied simply. "That makes you one." Neighbors gasped, some clapped. A few even shouted things like about time and justice. Karen stumbled toward the door, but Max rose with her, moving in sync like a shadow. She froze again, eyes darting to me. "Call him off," she squealed. "Max, heel," I commanded. Instantly, he padded to my side posture, proud eyes still locked on her. He didn't need to bare his teeth. His presence alone had done more damage than any bite could. The officers escorted Karen out onto the porch, where the full humiliation hit her. Phones lit her up like paparazzi flashes. Her power, once absolute in this little neighborhood, had crumbled in a single night. "Smile for your board," I said from the doorway, my voice laced with the same sarcasm she'd thrown at me countless times. "They'll love this report." She hissed something under her breath. I couldn't catch, but it didn't matter. The crowd had heard enough. The legend of Karen the intruder was already cemented. Daniels turned back to me. "You want to press charges?" I paused, watching Karen squirm. Every fiber of me wanted to say yes, to drag her through the system the way she'd dragged so many neighbors through her fake rules. But part of me also knew this public spectacle was punishment enough. "Not tonight," I said finally. "Her reputation's already in shreds. Sometimes humiliation's a harsher sentence than a fine." Daniels nodded. "Fair enough, but we'll file the report. You might want to keep this folder handy, it's evidence now." I gave him a firm handshake. "Appreciate it." As the squad car pulled away, Karen sat in the back seat, face pale, lips pressed into a thin line. For the first time, she wasn't in control. She was just another cautionary tale. Neighbors lingered, patting my back, congratulating Max, who soaked up the attention with his tail wagging like a victory flag. Someone even handed him a treat from their pocket. "Best HOA meeting I've ever seen," one guy laughed. I grinned, scratching Max's ear. "He runs a tighter ship than the whole board combined." And as the crowd dispersed, I realized something important. Karen might have connections, might still cling to her clipboard power, but after tonight she'd never recover the same fear she once commanded. Because everyone had seen the truth about her, about me, and about Max. And that truth was going to change everything. After the squad car disappeared into the night, Pine Ridge felt different. Lighter somehow. For months, Karen had hovered over this neighborhood like a storm cloud, clipboard in hand, threats on her lips. But now she was just a bad memory caught on 20 different iPhones. Neighbors I'd barely spoken to before wandered up to my porch that night. Some shook my hand. Others bent down to scratch Max behind the ears, whispering things like, "Good boy, you saved us." One older gentleman, Mr. Harris, leaned on his cane and said, "Son, I've lived here 25 years and I've never seen anyone put her in her place like that. Thank you." I just nodded, hiding a grin. It wasn't me who had done it. Not really. It was Max. My four-legged partner had held his ground when most humans would have backed down. The next morning, the HOA board scrambled into damage control mode. They sent out a desperate email. "The incident last night was a misunderstanding. The board remains committed to the safety and integrity of Pine Ridge Estates. Please refrain from spreading misinformation. Misinformation. Half the neighborhood had video proof. Clips were already circulating on social media. Someone even set it to dramatic music with the caption, "HOA President learns the hard way, don't mess with a K9." It had 1,000 views before breakfast. By noon, Karen's empire was in free fall. Residents started comparing notes. Families who had been too scared to speak up were suddenly bold, sharing their own stories of fines, harassment, and threats. One mother confessed Karen once cited her kids for playing too loudly. A retired veteran admitted she'd fined him twice for having a flagpole. The board tried to spin it, but there was no saving face. By the end of the week, a petition was circulating to remove Karen as president. Over 2/3 of the neighborhood signed within days. When the vote was finally held, it wasn't even close. Karen was stripped of her title, her clipboard power gone for good. But I wasn't done. See, I could have let things end there. Karen humiliated reputation, ruined HOA power revoked. That was justice enough for most. But people like her don't learn unless the consequences cut deeper. So I showed up to the final board meeting with my folder of every bogus fine and letter she'd ever sent me. I placed it on the table in front of the new president and said, "This is evidence of harassment, trespassing, and abuse of authority. I'm submitting it to my lawyer tomorrow." Karen, sitting in the back row, turned white. "Unless I added you'd like to make this right." The new president, eager to distance himself from her, agreed on the spot. All my fines were voided, my record wiped clean, and a formal apology issued to me and every resident she'd bullied. Karen stormed out before the meeting ended, muttering about conspiracies and ungrateful neighbors. But everyone else, they applauded. From that day forward, Pine Ridge changed. The fear was gone. Rules were still rules, sure, but they weren't weapons anymore. People decorated their porches without dread. Kids played freely. Flags flew again. And me, I sat on my porch each evening, beer in hand, Max at my feet, watching peace finally return. Every time someone passed by, they waved. Not out of obligation, but out of respect. The funniest part, HOA dues went down. Without Karen funneling funds into her beautification inspections, the money was used for actual improvements, fixing potholes, updating the playground, even hosting a block barbecue. Max was invited as guest of honor with a bandana around his neck that read, "Neighborhood Security Chief." Looking back, it's almost poetic. Karen thought she was the law around here, but in the end, it was my dog, the one she tried to banish, who enforced real justice. When I tuck Max into his bed at night, I can't help but laugh. He doesn't know he toppled a tyrant. He doesn't know he saved an entire neighborhood from years more of harassment. To him, he just did his job. But to me, and to everyone else on Pine Ridge, he's a hero. And Karen, well, last I heard, she sold her house and moved to another community a few towns over. I almost feel sorry for them. Almost. Because if they think they're safe from her clipboard crusades, they've got another thing coming. But I'll tell you this, she'll never forget the night she tried to invade my home and found herself face to face with justice on 4 legs. Justice named Max. At the end of the day, this story isn't really about HOA rules, or even about Karen, it's about power and how people choose to use it. Some people like Karen use power to control, to intimidate, to tear others down. But true strength isn't about fear. It's about loyalty, trust, and standing firm when someone tries to push you around. Max reminded me of that. He never wavered, never hesitated. He didn't need titles or authority, he simply knew what was right and what was wrong. In a world where people like Karen think they can bully their way through life, we all need to be a little more like Max, steady, unshaken, and loyal to what really matters. So here's the lesson. Don't let anyone with a clipboard, a badge, or even just a loud voice convince you that you're powerless. Stand your ground. Protect what's yours. And trust the ones who stand by you, because loyalty is worth more than any fine or rule book. Now I want to hear from you. Have you ever dealt with a Karen or an HOA nightmare? Drop your story in the comments below. And if you enjoyed this tale, don't forget to hit that subscribe button and join us for more HOA drama and poetic justice. Because around here the fight's never over, and you won't want to miss what happens next.